Please recite aloud Salawat.
Oh, it's my turn? أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين والصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا بالقاسم محمد الصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم من الآن إلى قيامة يوم الدين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلى الله Brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So as you know, we've been going through this a little bit of this history of Islam in North America, and I want to reiterate to you how important this is. I mean, it's not, I know it might not be the most exciting something to talk about sometimes, but it has to be done, and we have to know our history, and we have to recognize where we come from, and who we are, and how we fit in here, and the contributions we've made. Most of us don't even know that Muslims built the White House. There's a Muslim architect. There's Muslim labor that built the White House in Washington, D.C. Like, we're not connected to our history in North America. So last night we talked a little bit, because what we were doing was we were wrapping up that era of slavery in North America last night. Right? And at the end of slavery, we had mentioned that there was a 40 to 60 year period between 1865 and the beginning of the 20th century, where we see a clean break from West African Islam. For hundreds of years in North America, Islam in North America was West African in flavor. Yani, those slaves that came here as Muslims and tried to hold on to their religion, then we see that that was the flavor of Islam in North America. But at the dawn of the 20th century, from about, in my notes I think I have from about 1878, Muslim immigration to the United States increased. And so we mentioned already, as an example, those Muslims from the subcontinent who came not just to work in the farms, but to build the Panama Canal. Right? They came to America, settled in California, and became dispersed amongst the people, right? One thing I forgot to mention to you when we were talking about those Muslims from the Indian subcontinent that came, in almost every case of Muslim immigration to America, we as Muslims followed in the footsteps of other people. And so I'll give you an example. First, it was the Yankee peddler who operated his thing on the street selling silks or clothes or this or fruit or spices or this or that on the streets of America, major US cities, right? After the Yankee peddler became more prosperous, then it was the Jewish peddler. It was a Yahudi peddler, and he came with his card and he sold his stuff and whatnot, whatnot. Then who came next? It was the Arab Christian peddler. There's a famous story they tell, right, about a Lebanese Muslim goes to the port of Beirut. He gets on the boat. When he gets on the boat to go to America, he asks the captain, "Captain, are there any masjid in America?" And the captain says no, so he gets off. If he could have seen the progress that Islam would have made in the next 100 years, he would have stayed on the boat. But this was almost always the case, that the Muslim immigrant to North America was following in the footsteps of someone else. And so I'll give you an example when we talked about these Muslim immigrants from the subcontinent. In whose footsteps did they come? Sikh. The Sikhs came first from the Punjab to North America. If today you go on Google or whatever and Google Sikh population in North America, you're going to see they populate Vancouver and the western side of Canada and California. Why do they populate those areas? Because they didn't come like the rest of us came across the Atlantic. They came across the Pacific. You dig it? They came from the Pacific, from the Philippines, from India to the Philippines, from the Philippines to North America. And until this day, major Sikh population in North America is in the west coast of Canada and North America. I know I told some of y'all this story, but just to put a little smile on your face this evening, let me tell you the story I had with some Sikh in North America. So one time I went to California to give some speech, right? And afternoon time comes and I'm staying at my host house and I say, look, I'm gonna take a little walk. And I went out and I took a walk for some exercise. But an hour later, I came back to the house. When I opened the door of the house and step inside, it's wall-to-wall Sikh inside the house. Nothing but Sikh inside the house. So I close the door and I go back and I look at the house. I say, yeah, it's the right house. So I open the door again and I go in and it's Sikh in this house all over. So quickly I go in my room and I stay out of their way. Let them do their thing. They're sitting at the souffle, eating, whatever. Everybody leaves and I come out and I say, Mama John, the lady I'm staying with, I say, Mama John, what's going on? What's all the Sikh doing in your house? And she brings out a box. And in this box is the turban, the dagger, and a letter from Gobind Singh. You know who's Gobind Singh? Gobind Singh is one of the first gurus of the Sikh religion. When he was running and hiding from the Indian government, this Shia family hid him, protected him. And as a result, he wrote a letter that all Sikhs should forevermore respect and honor this Muslim family. And he gave them his turban and his dagger, which is a big thing for a Sikh. For a Sikh to give up his turban and his dagger, it's a big deal. And these people had it encased in glass. And to this day, Sikhs come from all over North America to do ziyarat at this Shia woman's family's house. It's a beautiful example of how traditions are transferred from the East to the West and how we should look to live in harmony with each other here in the West, right? It completely blew my mind. I love telling the story because it's a story that shows the links and the connections that we share between ourselves as Muslims, as Shias, and other religions, inshallah. So immigrants from the subcontinent, Muslim immigrants from the subcontinent, they came on the heels of Sikh immigrants. Arab immigrants to America came on the heels of Christian Arab immigration to North America, right? And this is the pattern that was established. So as I mentioned, first it was the Yankee peddler, then it was the Jewish peddler, then it was the Arab Christian peddler, and by the time of Theodore Roosevelt, it was the Arab Muslim peddler. And you know, Theodore Roosevelt was the first American president to have a Muslim nickname. Muslims gave him a nickname, and it caught on in the American press also. Theodore Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt had a Muslim nickname. Before he was president, he was inspector of police. And one of the jobs that they used to do in New York City is to inspect these peddlers and their carts and what they're selling and so on and so forth. So early in his career, this was his job. He used to go down to inspect the Muslim peddlers who were selling clothes and fruits and vegetables and spices and these things on the streets of New York City. And he got the nickname Harun al-Rashid. They gave him the nickname Harun al-Rashid. That he would come and inspect and make sure everything is muratab, right? But this is part of our history as Muslims in North America. So now, by 1840, small-scale Muslim immigration began. And it began with Yemenis and Turks. And this lasted up until World War I. Most of the immigrants from the Arab areas of the Ottoman Empire came with the purpose of making money, and many of them would try to make money and then go back home, right? However, America was in a very bad financial condition at that time, and it was very difficult for people to come to America, make money, make enough money to return back home. They became marooned here. They became stuck here. They couldn't make the money to get back home or send back home. And so it prevented them from prospering, and as a result, they settled in these United States permanently. Now, these early immigrants settled in areas that are really familiar to many of you and familiar to all of us. These early immigrants settled primarily in where? Dearborn, Michigan, Quincy, Massachusetts, and Ross, North Dakota. Remember, we mentioned last night the Ross, North Dakota mosque. One of the earliest mosques founded in North America by Syrian Muslims. But you know, in that time, there was no difference between Lebanon and Syria, right? We have it in our documents that many of these immigrants who opened this mosque in Ross, North Dakota, where were they from? Baalbek. From Baalbek, Lebanon. And they opened one of the first mosques in North America, in Ross, North Dakota. And that cemetery that they established there in Ross, North Dakota, it is still there to this day, inshallah. Okay. Many early 20th century Arab immigrants came from now today called Syria, Lebanon, settling in Ohio, Michigan, and Illinois. Immigration drastically increased from 1878 to 1924. When Muslims from the Balkans, Bosnia, and Syria settled in Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, Iowa, and the Dakotas. Iowa is another home of early, what we call then this Assyrian Muslims. You know, you got Assyrian Christians, right? In America, these people were known as Assyrian Muslims, but there was no difference between Syria and Lebanon at that time. Many of them were Shiite and Lebanese, and we see it from the names of the ulama that they brought from Baalbek. I mean, what's Baalbek? Majority Shia population area in Lebanon, right? So they came, and one of the places that they opened was that masjid that we mentioned last night in Iowa, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. The masjid still exists there, although it's only been rebuilt for historic purposes. It's rarely used. It was the only Muslim cemetery in the area for 90 years. So these people came and established communities. Why did they come? How did they end up settling in these areas of Ohio, Illinois, and Michigan? Because they worked for the Ford Motor Company. And a lot of white people, tell you something about history, a lot of white people would not work. At least white people that had some self-respect or whatever you want to call it, right? They wouldn't work for the Ford Motor Company because it was hard work, long hours. And Ford, y'all might not know this, but when you get an opportunity, look into Henry Ford, okay? This man, he had a lot of different ideas. on how to do things. There's a reason why he's the founder of like the assembly line. He was a very smart man, but very peculiar person also. Okay, very, we'll call him weird. Okay, tough man to work for, very difficult company to work for, and he was one of the first people to hire African Americans and immigrants because they were the only people willing to work for him. They were the only people that would go into his factories, put up with his BS, work hard, collect their pay, and go home. You understand? So they came to North America and they worked for the Ford Motor Company. Today, as a result of this, one of the longest standing Shia and Arab and Muslim American communities in North America is Dearborn, Michigan, which has always been a hotspot for the Ford Motor Company. We mentioned very quickly, just in passing, what we call the Mother Mosque of America, once known as the Rose Fraternity Lodge in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. It's the oldest standing purpose-built mosque in the United States. It was completed in 1934. The original mosque at this site was built in 1929, then rebuilt in 1934, from Lebanon, primarily from Lebanon. And today, the mosque has been rebuilt, but only 15 feet by 15 feet. As a kind of a historical marker. It was accepted into the US Registry of Historic Sites in 2018. The mosque was rebuilt in 2005. The Assyrian Muslim cemetery is that cemetery that's there, and it was also registered as a National Historic Site in 2018. The oldest Muslim cemetery in the US was, as we mentioned, in Ross, North Dakota. Khayr. Muslims have a long history in North America. And it's not just Arabs. It's not just Lebanese. It's not just Shi'i or like this. We have different groups that immigrated. In 1906, Bosnian Muslims started immigrating to Chicago, Illinois, and started the Jamatul Khairiyah, which is the benevolent society, and it's a social service society dedicated to Bosnian Muslims. It's still around today, and they just celebrated their 100 and so many years anniversary. They still are active in Chicago. Very early on in their history, they brought Sheikh Kamel Avdich, a graduate from Al-Azhar in Cairo, and he was their leader and their teacher for many years in Chicago, Illinois, and they're still there. In 1907, a lot of people don't know that a huge wave of immigration of Polish Muslims. I mean, did y'all even know they had Muslims in Poland? They have Muslims in Poland, okay? They're Tartars. You know what the Tartars are? One of the subgroups of the Mongols, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. These Polish Muslims immigrated to New York in 1907, and they started one of the first Muslim organizations in New York City, the American Mohammedan Society, which has since become, today, you go to New York, you'll find them as the Power Street Masjid. Moving right along. In 2017, at the Power Street Masjid, the Tatar Muslims from Poland celebrated their 110-year anniversary of the establishment of their masjid. In 1950, in what was likely the first mosque founded by Albanian Muslims. A lot of people don't know Albania is a predominantly Muslim country with a fairly active Shia minority. A lot of people don't know this about Albania. Roughly 3% of the Albanian population is Shi'i. Now, they're not Usuli Shi'i like us. They follow the Bektashi Sufi order, which is a Shia Sufi order. It's based in Tirana, Albania, right? But they believe just like we do in all 12 Imams, and they celebrate Muharram, and they commemorate Muharram rather, and celebrate Shahr Ramadan. They do everything most Shias do, except they're a little Sufi. Look into them, Bektashi. The first Albanian Bektashi Takia was established in Taylor, Michigan in 1954. So we have deep roots in this Michigan area also. And these, again, like I said, are Bektashi Shi'i Muslims. Albanian Muslims first came to the US in 1915 in Biddeford, Maine. And a cemetery in Biddeford, Maine still exists there, a Muslim cemetery in Biddeford, Maine. Now then, one thing that's a subject of great discussion, and we'll actually continue this tomorrow night, but the Ahmadiyya Muslim movement. Y'all know about Ahmadiyyas, right? Qadianis. There's two groups of them. One group of them, we do not consider them as to be Muslims because they hold that their follower, that their leader is a prophet after Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we don't accept that. But that other group of them that's simply revered him as a mujaddid, then we have no problem with them, right? These people showed up in 1920. Now, the Qadiani or Ahmadi Muslim movement has a very deep impact on some of the movements that we mentioned last night, like Noble Drew Ali and the Moorish Science Temple, which would lead into the Nation of Islam, which is currently under the leadership of Louis Farrakhan, and furthermore into the 5% Nation of Earths and Gods, which is an offshoot of the Nation of Islam. And in the coming days, we'll talk about these guys. But the Ahmadi movement under Mufti Muhammad Sadiq, right? He came to America in the 1920s. And believe it or not, these Ahmadis were some of the earliest pseudo-Muslims to begin propagating Islam in many major urban centers. And by the 1930s, they had a very large following. But look, this is what usually happens with these pseudo-Islamic groups. And in the coming days, we'll talk more about this. People come into Islam through these groups. They're introduced to Islam and Islamic concepts and Islamic theology through these groups. But as they grow in the deen, then they leave these groups for more orthodox, quote unquote, orthodox groups, whether it be Sunni or Shi'i. Y'all get what I'm trying to say? So we should never look down on these groups. This is one thing I try to tell our people. Ahmadis, Moorish Science Temple, Nation of Islam, 5% of Nation of Earths and Gods. We know that their beliefs, their theology, their ideology is not pure Islam. But at the same time, we should build bridges with them. We should increase our connection with them. We should increase our interaction with them. Because many Americans get introduced to Islam through these groups. But as their Iman grows and as their knowledge of Islam grows, then they gravitate towards more Orthodox Islam. And the mistake we make is that we lock up ourselves in our little spot, our little slice of Iran, or our little slice of Pakistan, or our little slice of Iraq, or our little slice of Lebanon that we've recreated here. We lock ourselves up safely inside of here and do not interact with the people that are around us, right? And so we have very little knowledge and as such, very little influence over these people. And this is something that we really should look at as far as our history and our development. Here's an excellent example. I just mentioned to you that the first Albanian Bektashi Tekiye Khanaqah, we call it in Persian, right? The Sufi meeting place. It's these Bektashis, they're Shi'i. They're established in Taylor, Michigan. You know how far Taylor, Michigan is from Dearborn? It's about a 15-minute drive. Now, I've visited this Tekiye before, and I've sat and talked with the Darvish that are there, right? You know what they told me? No Shi'i from Dearborn comes and visit them. Yeah, we got like what? How many Shi'i ulama in Dearborn, Michigan? Big kuluf amama on their head. a mama the size of a flying saucer on their head, and they can't go visit their Shi'i brother who's 15-minute drive away. Imagine the exchange of knowledge, the exchange of help, the influence that we could have on each other if we just reached out to each other. These guys have been there since 1954. Y'all do the math. How long's that been, man? I'm not good at math. Huh? 6 years to 60, 40 years to 2000, 20 more years. Bro, like 66 years they've been there. And the Shi'i of Dearborn don't go visit them. And it's a 15-minute drive. This is what's destroying us in North America. Huh? This is what's tearing us up in North America. You go to California, there's 3 Shi'i masjid within a half-hour drive of each other. You can drive from Masjid al-Nabi to Masjid to Zainabia, and from Zainabia to Al-Wilaya. They're all within a half-hour drive of each other. But this alim has no irtibat with that alim. And this masjid has absolutely no connection with that masjid. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's ridiculous. And we're just talking about Shi'i. You know, forget about it if you try to tell Shi'i you have some irtibat with the Sunni masjid next door. 25 years ago, my teacher told me that we should begin building irtibat with Wafdi Muhammad's organization. You know who's Wafdi Muhammad? Let's go off track because we're running out of time now. Maybe we'll get back on track. Wafdi, okay, in 1975, Elijah Muhammad died. Okay, Elijah Muhammad was the leader of the Nation of Islam. In 1975, he died, and his son, Wafdi Muhammad, took over the organization. But Wafdi Muhammad had become a Sunni Muslim. He was not affiliated ideologically anymore with the Nation of Islam. Wafdi Muhammad officially closed the Nation of Islam. In 1975, the Nation of Islam was disbanded by Wafdi Muhammad. And most of the followers of the Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad, followed his son, Wafdi Muhammad, into Orthodox Sunni Islam. Y'all with me? The Nation of Islam had died. Okay? By 1980, the guy that we now know as their leader, the Minister Louis Farrakhan, re-established the Nation of Islam. And those people who didn't want to be Sunni or didn't want to go in that direction, they joined up with him. And this is how you still have the Nation of Islam today. But Wafdi Muhammad has one of the most expansive, well-organized, non-sectarian Sunni organizations in North America today. I mean, and we'll talk a little bit more about Wafdi Muhammad as our days go by. But Wafdi Muhammad, I mean, you can go anywhere in America and find the Sister Clara Muhammad schools. They had a network of schools and businesses and mosques that spread out across the United States. These people have not been infiltrated by Wahhabiyah. You go to your local Sunni masjid, they're so Wahhabi, they don't even know the difference between Wahhabi and real Sunni anymore. Am I wrong? You go to your local Sunni masjid here in Indianapolis, they don't know what the difference is between, Wahhabiyah and Tasanno, which there's a marked difference. Sunni ulama condemned Abdul Wahab. Sunni ulama condemned this man, and still do. Most of our Sunni brothers can't tell the difference between Wafdi Muhammad's organization refused to become influenced by them. Here is a huge nationwide organization, and we as Shia Muslims have no connection with them. Most of the Shia Muslims that you will come across that are African American came out of Wafdi Muhammad's movement. So realize what's going on. Because we've locked ourselves up in our little safe space, and so we've also cut off our influence from the people around us. Inshallah, Allah will help us to overcome this situation. Send us salawat. Let's continue. Send another salawat, inshallah. Okay, this mosque that we mentioned earlier, the mosque in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, it's the mosque where Abdullah Ikram, who was a Muslim veteran of World War I, used to preach and teach and establish Quran classes for the people. He was the one who wrote to President Eisenhower during World War II and persuaded the M to be added to the military dog tags. Because up until that time, you had the C, the J, C for Christianity, J for Judaism. It was this brother, Abdullah Ikram, who pushed for identification as Muslim on the US military dog tags. So we have a long history in the country. Tomorrow night we'll talk a little bit about Sati Majid. Sati Majid was a Sudanese immigrant, alim from Sudan to the United States, and he got into spreading Islam in North America. And from Sati Majid now, we see the growth of Sunni Islam in North America. Tomorrow night we'll also try to mention Sheikh Dawood Faisal. What's so important about Sheikh Dawood Faisal that we have to bring him up? The State Street Mosque in New York City is one of the first Orthodox Sunni mosques established in the 1930s in New York City by Sheikh Dawood Faisal. Sheikh Dawood Faisal was from Grenada in the West Indies, in the Caribbean. His wife, Sister Khadija, from Bermuda in the Caribbean. There's a deep, deep link between North America and the Caribbean also when it comes to Islam. Every major Sunni movement of the 1960s and 70s in North America, their leadership attended the State Street Mosque of Sheikh Dawood Faisal. That means the Dar al-Islam movement, and that means the Islamic Party of North America, which is how I came into the deen, through the Islamic Party of North America. Understand something both about both these organizations, Dar al-Islam movement and the Islamic Party of North America. At the time that the revolution happened in Iran in 1979, both of these organizations were split in half and destroyed because their leadership became Shia. You understand it? Dar al-Islam, Islamic Party of North America, grew out of the State Street Mosque in New York City with Sheikh Dawood Faisal, who was a Chishti Sufi. Their leadership, Sheikh Muzaffaruddin Hamid, who was the founder and leader of the Islamic Party of North America, attended this mosque. And out of this history now is born Tashayyu in North America, because both of these organizations, their leadership became Shia at the time of the 1979 revolution. The organizations were split, and then comes Nuruddin in 1989. We accepted Islam with the members of the Islamic Party of North America, who by that time were all Shia. I mean, this is a deep, deep history of our people in North America, of Muslims, of Tashayyu, of Islam in North America. And we don't understand it. And we have to know it, we have to learn it, and we have to be proud of it, inshallah. In closing this evening, and I want to stress something. Just because we're talking about the history of Islam in North America and what we're building in North America as an American people, I want to remind everybody, that doesn't mean you forget where you come from. That doesn't mean you discard your culture and your language, because Allah is building an ummah in North America. And your input as an Arab, as a Pakistani, as an Indian, as Afghani, as whatever, your input is necessary. This is what's going to shape this ummah in North America. This is what's going to give us flavor. It's very important that we hold on to our culture. I'm not telling anybody to give up your culture and become American. What I am saying is realize that there are good things in America that we can gain from and learn from and use, but we should not let go what we've come with. I was surprised a few years ago when I looked at the Kitab al-Marsiyah that many of our Pakistani Indian brothers read, right? It's written in English letters. I'm surprised. Tampa is the Dearborn of the South for Palestinians, right? I'm surprised by how many Palestinians cannot read Arabic. And the reason for this is because somehow we feel that we have to become Americanized. My personal view is we should hold on to our culture. In your homes, you should not be speaking English. Your kids are gonna learn English when they go to school, when they go out in the society, and they're gonna learn English better than you'll ever learn English because they're children. But at home, speak Arabic. At home, speak Urdu. At home, speak Persian. At home, speak your own language. Teach your own culture. Because this is what's going to give the ummah that we're building in North America strength, backbone, flavor. Are you all with me? Send us salawat and let's call it. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should have mercy on our souls. Ya Allah, forgive us of our sins. Guide us to your straight path. Ya Allah, set firm our feet in your path. Ya Allah, strengthen our legs in your service. Hasten the appearance of your Imam and make us his helpers and supporters upon his return. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Salawat. We still got a few minutes if anybody wants to ask any questions. A few minutes still for tour. Otherwise, we can go do what we usually do, line up outside and wait for the water. Yes, Allah.
So actually, we have to learn from your speech is everybody has to be messenger for the Islam.
Ahsan.
Second, we have to build a good relationship. First of all, لا يغير الله بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم.
That's right.
From me, I said to myself, I'm stupid. Why? Because when I go back to Lebanon to show myself I am an American, I speak English everywhere. My neighbor, how are you, my friend? So, to show the people like I am something. So speaking English, it's not heroes or it's not like something big. Yeah. So like what you said, it's very good to keep talking your native language in the house and teach your kids.
Yes.
I feel sorry. My nephew and my niece, when I spoke with them in Arabic, Khalu, can you stop English? I can't understand you, man. Where are you coming from?
Now you gotta tell
And he's 20 years old.
Yeah.
I look at them and say, man, what's this country, what she does with you? So anyway.
Part of it is our fault too, because what happens is the parents feel that I need my children to speak English so that they can fit into the society. And that's natural. And so the parents take the effort to speak English at home and make sure that the children's English is good. But I just want to say that don't worry. The children are gonna learn English. I saw this in Iran. In Iran, new students would come, as an example, from Africa, right? The parents go to Farsi school. The children come outside and play in the kuche, in the alleyway with the other children. The parents take 8 months, 9 months to learn Persian. The children take 3 weeks, 4 weeks to learn Persian. And before the time is over, it's the children taking the parents here and there to be the translator because the children learn the language so fast playing in the street with the other children. Meanwhile, the parents are going to Farsi school for 9 months, a year, whatever, and the children have learned it in a few weeks. This is the nature. Don't worry about it. Speak your language at home with your children. When they go to school, they'll learn English. Who cares if the other kids laugh at them? It builds character. If other kids didn't laugh at me, because I grew up broke, right? If other kids didn't laugh at me for my accent or my clothes or my shoes or my this, then I wouldn't be the tough son of a gun that I am today. So it's okay. Let them get teased. Let them get laughed at. It's okay to be a little bit mazloom in your younger years. It builds back. What do we say? Zulm builds character. A little bit. Look at how good Iraqi people are good. Iraqi people are good people, you know. You know why? Because Zulm builds character. Okay? So let's remember that, inshallah. Don't be afraid.
But not too much for Lebanese people or Iraqi people or all Arab people. They are now open.
Yeah.
So they are open and they took us to the head.
Yeah, now they took it
talking
around.
last night to friends in Dearborn. He told me, don't come to Dearborn, Luke, because my name is nicknamed Luke over there. Says, don't come over here because you will be suffering and everything changed.
This is the way it goes.
Everything changed.
The Muslim becomes the Zalim. Salawat.